I thought they had brought in a different speaker. And you know, there's a lot of pressure when you come up here, and Stephen says there's this ultimate mystery, and Bob's going to tell you about it. He's right, of course, but still there's a pressure to it, getting me down just a little. You know, this month is Vibe, and the first part of it, Angie had vibration that he told us about. I just wanted it noted who had the second part, intelligence. But you know, when we're talking about this, we're talking about universal intelligence. And there's two primary questions. First, is there a universal intelligence? And then, of course, if there is, then what is it like? What's its nature? So let's look at the first one first. Is there a universal intelligence? People who believe there is not, there's two primary arguments for that. One of those arguments is there's no verifiable, reliable communication from God if God exists. I mean, there's lots of people who say that they speak with God. Unfortunately, God seems to give them lots of different messages. Some people are told by God, love everyone. And some people are told, well, love this group, but hate that group because I don't like them. You know? And some people are told some things are sacred, and some people are told other things are sacred, and some people are told that this book has all of the truth, and somebody else, this book has all of the truth. And I mean, it's always possible God is psychotic. If that's not the truth, then we have a communication problem. And then the other reason for saying there isn't a universal intelligence is that it's unnecessary. Everything can be explained by random chance. And this comes from the concept, I was just reading a book about where they first were coming up with this, of deep time. You know of deep space. But deep time is that concept that there's literally millions and in fact billions of years for things to have evolved. And so because of all of this time available, that it could all just evolve by chance. If we were talking about thousands or hundreds of thousands of years, that wouldn't be true. But with this kind of time, everything could evolve just by chance. So let's talk about those two. I mean, the first one, you have to kind of give them that argument. There's no reliable, verifiable communication directly with God. I mean, there's nobody who can say, God's speaking with me, and I'm going to turn up the volume right now so you can all hear what divine intelligence is like. I mean, unless we just assume I'm divine intelligence, and then you're all hearing this directly from me. I don't know. Otherwise, that never occurs. But the problem with that is that it assumes that this universal intelligence must communicate through speech in some form. I mean, even telepathy. It makes the assumption that this universal intelligence is going to communicate in the same way that we do. But there's absolutely no reason to assume that. This intelligence could be so different, so magnificent, so great that its communication occurs in a totally different way. Maybe it doesn't communicate by speech at all. It communicates by its actions. It communicates perhaps through intuition. And so the fact that it doesn't communicate by some one presentation of direct communication with God is no definitive proof that there isn't universal intelligence. Our dog Gracie doesn't speak to us directly. And yet she communicates everything she needs and tells us she needs it right then. She's very good at it. So if that's not a requirement of universal intelligence, this direct communication, how about the other? Random chance. Everything could occur by random chance. And certainly we have actual observation that appears to show that some things do develop, if you will, by chance. But you're talking about, even though you have this deep time, you're talking about tremendous chance. The scientists who believe this are scientists that I would like to play poker with, because they're willing to bet on tremendously bad odds. Because even though you have all of this time, everything would have to come together perfectly to end up with life as we know it. If gravity, if the electromagnetic force, if the strong force that holds the molecules together, or the atoms together, if it were off by 1/1,000,000,000%, life as we know it wouldn't exist. If all of those aspects through the Big Bang, if any part of it had varied by the minutest amount, if carbon didn't vibrate at a particular way within a star, it would not, or if helium didn't, carbon wouldn't form and we wouldn't be here. The odds of all of this happening, unless for us to be here, are so tremendously high that to me it is a more logical assumption. I'm not talking about faith, I'm talking about a more logical assumption to believe that there is an intelligence that determines this, then that all of these miraculous coincidences happened by random chance to put us here. And so I really believe that that allows the preponderance of evidence, even though there's no proof, to say that there is a universal intelligence. And if that's true, then we move to the second one. What is this universal intelligence like? And even though I said I would explain it all, I lied. Universal intelligence, divine spirit, is so much beyond what our minds could comprehend that there is absolutely no way to know it. If anyone tells you they actually know the mind of God, they haven't a clue what they're talking about. And yet, we can know aspects of it. We can get to some root, fundamental knowledge about it. And I want to approach that by how we interact with the divine, how we interact with universal intelligence to determine some aspect of it. And I want to start off by looking at it and saying universal intelligence is not based on the logic that humans know. Now, I don't mean the logic that tells you that if you have numbers on the back of a fortune cookie, that those numbers are going to make you win a $100 million lottery. That's a whole different type of logic that I'm not that familiar with. But I'm talking about the general logic that runs our world, the logic of the Greek philosophers. And this is a very simple logic. It's built up step by step. And it starts off with, it's very simple, if A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C. What this means, equals means is the exact same as. So if A is exactly the same as B, and B is exactly the same as C, then A must be exactly the same as C. It makes sense. It works. That's how our lives are put together. Without that kind of logic, we would be living in caves. It's not that it's not good. It's not that it's not that it doesn't work. It's that it has its limits, and limits that do not take you to universal intelligence. Because the same thing it says is, if A is exactly the same as B, but B is different than C, B and C are totally different, then A must be different than C as well, right? If A is exactly like B, B is exactly like C, then A must be different than C. And yet, that's not how the universe works. We've talked about this before, and I just briefly mentioned it. There are particles that make up the very essence of the physical universe, and these particles are enclosed entities. And there are waves that make up the basis of the universe, energy waves. And energy waves are always part of an energy field, which is a larger thing spread out. They are two absolutely different things. And yet, every single thing at the subatomic level is both of those, even though that's totally impossible. So how does that tell us about universal intelligence? Well, it tells us this, that is what happens in the universe. And the physical universe reflects the spiritual universe. And so I tell you this, that you can be, and you are at times, spiritual particles. Now, I mentioned this last time, and Stephen said to me, you should explain that a little more. And I always do whatever Stephen says. So, I wanted to talk about that in a little more detail. Spiritual particles, what is that? Well, remember, a particle is an enclosed entity. A particle is us as individuals, as egos. Bob Hand, as this person standing up here, is a spiritual particle. It's real. I'm real. It's not that it's an illusion, but it's one manifestation of who I am. As a spiritual particle, I'm separate from all of you. I'm separate from everything. I'm separate from divine spirit, from God. As a spiritual particle, I can interact with you, but I can't really join with you. As a spiritual particle, I can interact with all of the things around me. I can look at them, I can see them, I can test them, but I can't really merge with them. As a spiritual particle, I can know in aspects of God. But it's always the God from the outside. If you will, it's the particle God, the spiritual particle God, who is out there, and we're two separate things. And this spiritual particle God, and remember, if particles exist in the physical, then some aspect of that must exist in the spiritual. And so this one aspect of how we can interact with God is as the spiritual God, the older God. And this is the God with the ego. This is the God who says, if you don't worship me, I don't love you. This is the God who says, I want very particular things that you must do. This is the God who's out there looking down on us. And you're going to know lots of people who are spiritual particles. Billions of spiritual particles are all around us. Some even of people who are considered holy people. Because they communicate with this spiritual particle God who's out there. And there is a power in that universal God, in that form of universal intelligence. But it's a limited power.